Please subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Let me know in the comments which moment made your breath catch. You know how sometimes the world feels muffled? Like you're walking through it wrapped in thick cotton wool? That was me, before him. Just existing. Moving from point A to B, work to home, grocery store to empty apartment. The rain that day wasn't unusual. Seattle in late October, gray skies were practically a default setting. But this rain felt different. Heavier. More insistent. Like it was trying to wash something clean, or maybe just drown it. I ducked into the Dusty Quill, this little used bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a Thai place that smelled perpetually of lemongrass and fish sauce. It was my refuge, smelling of old paper, vanilla-scented candles they always burned, and that faint, comforting scent of dust undisturbed. I was hunting for a specific edition of Wuthering Heights, the one with the stormy moors on the cover. A silly, sentimental quest, really. I was scanning the bees for Bronte, fingers trailing over cracked spines, lost in the familiar ritual when I felt it. Not a touch. Not a sound. Just a shift in the air. A sudden awareness, like a single, clear note struck in a silent room. I looked up. And there he was. Leaning against a bookshelf labeled Cartography and Exploration, holding a thick, navy blue volume. He wasn't looking at the book. He was looking at me. Not with that brash, uncomfortable stare some men have. No. This was different. Deeper. Like he wasn't just seeing my rain-dampened coat or the messy bun escaping its clip. He was seeing the me buried beneath the cotton wool. His eyes were a quiet, stormy gray, the color of the sky outside just before the downpour truly began. Dark hair, slightly unruly, falling across his forehead. He wore a simple charcoal sweater, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. He looked solid, grounded, and completely, utterly unexpected. Our gazes locked. Held. The muffled world vanished. All I heard was the frantic drumming of rain against the windowpane and the sudden, too loud thud of my own heart against my ribs. Seconds stretched, elastic and infinite. A flush crept up my neck, warm despite the bookstore's slight chill. His lips, a firm, expressive line, parted slightly, as if he was about to speak, but no sound came out. Just that look. That intense, searching, knowing look. It felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, the wind tugging at my clothes, both terrifying and exhilarating. Then, a clatter from the back room, Mr. Henderson dropping a stack of books, probably shattered the moment. He blinked, the connection snapping like a taut wire. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not mocking. Apologetic? Wry? I couldn't tell. He lowered his gaze back to his book, but the air between us remained charged, crackling with an invisible energy. I fumbled with the bookshelf, suddenly incapable of remembering the alphabet. Bronte. Bronte. My fingers trembled. I found it eventually, the familiar cover, but the thrill of the hunt was gone, replaced by a hyper-awareness of the men 6 feet away. I could feel the weight of his presence like a physical warmth against my side. I stole glances, quick as hummingbird wings. The focused line of his brow as he read. The way his thumb absently stroked the edge of the page. The quiet strength in the set of his shoulders. He moved then, heading towards the counter with his book. I panicked, clutching my Wuthering Heights like a shield, and practically tripped over my own feet to get there before him. Mr. Henderson, bless his oblivious heart, rang us up together. "Found your storm, Clara?" Mr. Henderson asked, nodding at my book as he processed the man's purchase, The History of Ocean Currents. Fitting, somehow. Always looking for one, Mr. H, I managed, my voice sounding unnaturally high. The man beside me turned his head. Those gray eyes met mine again, closer now. Up close, I saw flecks of green, like moss on wet stone. He didn't speak. Just held my gaze, and in that silent exchange, volumes were spoken. A recognition. A question. A shared secret born in the space between heartbeats. A faint, clean scent of soap and something deeper, like cedarwood or rain-washed earth, reached me. He paid. I paid. We stood awkwardly for a second by the door, both hesitating, the rain still sheeting down outside. He held the door open for me, his arm brushing ever so slightly against my shoulder as I passed. The contact, brief and accidental, sent a jolt through me, sharp and sweet. Like touching a live wire wrapped in velvet. "After you," he said. His voice. Oh, his voice. It was low, quiet, with a rough edge like stones tumbling in a stream. It resonated somewhere deep in my chest. "Thanks," I breathed, stepping out into the downpour. He followed, pulling his collar up against the rain. We stood under the narrow awning, the space suddenly intimate, filled with the roar of water on pavement and the scent of wet concrete. He looked at me, water beating on his dark hair, tracing paths down his temple. "Seems we both sought shelter from the storm," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "Inside and out." His words were simple, yet they felt layered, echoing the unspoken tension between us. "The best kind of shelter," I replied, surprising myself with the boldness. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I'm Clara." A slow, genuine smile transformed his face, warming the gray of his eyes. "Leo." He held out his hand. Not for a handshake. Palm up, an invitation. I hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine. Warm. Strong. Calloused in a way that spoke of physical work, or maybe just holding on to things tightly. It wasn't just a touch, it was a connection, a circuit completing. A current of pure, undiluted awareness flowed from his skin to mine, radiating up my arm, flooding my chest, stealing my breath. It was the first touch, the spark that ignites the kindling. We stood there, hands clasped, rain cascading off the awning inches from our shoulders, lost in the silent, electric language of that simple contact. Time stopped. The city blurred. It was just us, the rain, and the shocking intimacy of intertwined fingers. He didn't let go immediately. His thumb brushed lightly over my knuckle, a whisper of sensation that made my knees feel weak. "Clara," he murmured, my name sounding like a secret on his lips. "It suits you." We finally released each other, the absence of his touch feeling like a sudden chill. I gestured vaguely towards the bus stop down the street. "Can I walk you?" The question was soft, almost hesitant, but his eyes held a quiet intensity that brooked no easy refusal. This rain seems determined to drown the world. So, we walked. Not touching, but the space between us hummed with the memory of it. We talked. Or rather, words tumbled out, tentative at first, then gaining momentum. Not about the weather, or work. He spoke of growing up near the coast, the constant presence of the ocean shaping him. I confessed my love for old stories, for finding beauty in forgotten things, like the pressed wildflower I kept tucked inside my worn copy of Jane Eyre. He told me about restoring old wooden boats, the patience and care it required. I mentioned my frustrating job designing sterile office spaces, yearning to create something with soul. Our words wove a fragile bridge between us, each shared confidence, each quiet laugh, strengthening it. The rain soaked through my coat, plastered my hair to my neck, but I barely felt the cold. I felt alive. Awake. The cotton wool was gone. He walked me all the way to my apartment building, an old brick affair with ivy clinging stubbornly to its sides. We stopped under the arched entryway, sheltered from the relentless rain. The streetlight cast long, watery shadows. The air crackled again, thick with everything unspoken, everything held back during the walk. The longing was a physical ache, a tightness in my chest, a flutter low in my belly. We stood close, too close for strangers, yet not close enough. His gaze traced the raindrops on my cheek, the line of my jaw, my lips. His own lips parted slightly. I could see the rapid pulse beating in the hollow of his throat. The world narrowed to the space between us, charged with anticipation. I swayed towards him, drawn by an invisible force stronger than gravity. "Clara," his voice was rough, a scrape against the silence. He lifted a hand, slow, deliberate. His knuckles brushed a stray, wet tendril of hair from my temple. The touch was feather-light, yet it burned. His fingers lingered near my cheek, trembling almost imperceptibly. His eyes, dark pools now in the dim light, held mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "Seeing you in that bookstore, it was like finding a compass point I didn't know I'd lost." My breath hitched. The confession, whispered against the drumming rain, was more intimate than any kiss could have been. I felt it too. I breathed, the words barely audible. Like waking up. He leaned in. So slowly. Giving me time. Giving himself time. His forehead gently rested against mine. His eyes closed. Mine fluttered shut. We breathed the same air, warm and shared. The scent of rain, wet wool, his cedarwood soap, and something uniquely him enveloped me. His nose brushed mine. The warmth of his skin radiated against my chilled face. The electricity wasn't just between us now, it was within us, a low thrumming current that resonated in my bones. We stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing each other in, suspended in the exquisite tension of the almost kiss. It was agonizing. It was perfect. The promise was everything. Then he pulled back, just an inch. His eyes opened, meeting mine with a look of raw vulnerability that shook me. He traced the curve of my jaw with his thumb, a touch so tender it brought tears to my eyes. "Tomorrow?" he asked, the single word heavy with hope and unspoken desire. "Tomorrow," I whispered, the word of vow. He stepped back, the cool, damp air rushing into the space where his warmth had been. He gave me one last, long look, a look that held the echo of his touch, the promise of his whispered words, and the intense, unfulfilled longing that bound us. Then he turned, disappearing into the curtain of rain. I stood under the archway long after he vanished, my hand pressed to the spot on my cheek where his thumb had traced. My skin still tingled. My heart felt too big for my chest. The rain hadn't stopped, but the world wasn't muffled anymore. It was vibrant, humming, alive with color and sound I hadn't noticed in years. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one he'd ignited within me. That night, sleep was impossible. Lying in the dark, the memory of his touch, his voice, his quiet eyes, played on a loop behind my eyelids. The way his body had leaned into mine under the archway, the solid warmth of him, the unspoken language of his nearness, it wasn't about explicit details. It was about the potential. The magnetic pull. The way my entire being seemed to orient itself towards him, like a flower seeking the sun. It was the deep, resonant ache of wanting that hadn't yet found its release, but promised an intensity that was almost frightening. Weeks later, in the quiet sanctuary of his small apartment overlooking the restless harbor, the dam finally broke. Not with force, but with a slow, inevitable surrender. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Rain tapped softly against the window, a familiar rhythm now. We stood close, the space between us charged with weeks of accumulated longing, whispered confessions in the dark, fingers brushing over coffee cups, knees touching under small tables. He reached for me, his hands finding my waist, drawing me in. No words were needed. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with the silent understanding that had grown between us. His lips found mine, finally, a soft collision that felt less like a beginning and more like a homecoming. It started slow, a tentative exploration, a rediscovery. But the spark that had ignited in the bookstore, nurtured by stolen glances and shared breaths, flared into an all-consuming fire. His touch was deliberate, reverent. Hands tracing the map of my back, learning the landscape of my shoulders, the curve of my spine. Mine moved with a will of their own, seeking the solid plane of his chest, the strong column of his neck, threading through the dark silk of his hair. Clothes became obstacles, barriers to the skin we craved. They fell away like autumn leaves, discarded without thought. Then, skin met skin. The shock of it was profound. Not cold, but a radiant warmth blooming where we touched. A sigh escaped me, caught against his lips. He echoed it, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. We sank onto softness, a tangle of limbs and shared breath. There was no rush. The slow burn had brought us here, to this precipice of intimacy, and we intended to savor the fall. Our bodies moved not with frantic urgency, but with a deep, resonant synchronicity. Like waves meeting the shore, a gentle surge, a retreat, a return with gathering power. A push and pull as ancient as the tides. His body arched over mine, a shelter, a question. Mine rose to meet him, an answer, an acceptance. Every point of contact was a revelation, the smooth skin of his back beneath my palms, the hard muscle of his thigh against mine, the exquisite friction where our bodies aligned. It wasn't about the mechanics, it was about the feeling. The overwhelming sense of connection, deeper than the physical. It was the way his eyes, dark and fathomless in the candlelight, never left mine, holding me captive in a shared universe of sensation. It was the low murmur of my name on his lips, a sacred sound. It was the way his breath hitched against my neck, a silent testament to his own unraveling. It was the building pressure, slow and inexorable, like a storm gathering its power. Our movements became a language, a conversation spoken in gasps and sighs and the slick, rhythmic slide of sweat-slicked skin. The tension coiled tighter, a beautiful, agonizing crescendo. Every nerve ending sang. The world outside, the harbor, the rain, the city lights, ceased to exist. There was only this, the heat, the weight, the profound intimacy of being utterly known and accepted in this most vulnerable state. The friction built, a delicious torment, a gathering wave poised to break. I clung to him, fingers digging into the hard muscles of his shoulders, my head thrown back, lost in the sensation that was less about individual touch and more about the merging of our beings. A low moan escaped him, vibrating against my chest, a sound of pure, desperate need that mirrored my own. And then, the wave crested. Not a violent crash, but a profound, shuddering release that rolled through us simultaneously. It wasn't fireworks, it was a deep, resonant sigh from the very core of the earth. A letting go so profound it felt like flying and falling all at once. Our bodies moved together in the final, pulsing aftershocks, a slow, shared descent from the peak. He buried his face in the curve of my neck, his breath hot and ragged against my skin. My arms tightened around him, holding him close as the tremors subsided, leaving us breathless, tangled, utterly spent. We lay entwined in the candlelit silence, the only sound our slowing breaths and the soft patter of rain against the glass. The storm within had passed, leaving a profound, echoing calm. His fingers traced lazy, meaningless patterns on my bare shoulder. My head rested on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. It was a rhythm more intimate than any words, a silent promise echoing in the quiet aftermath. The slow burn hadn't ended, it had simply found a new, deeper register. We were no longer strangers seeking shelter. We were the shelter, built brick by whispered word, glance by longing glance, touch by electric touch. And the fire, banked now but glowing fiercely within, promised warmth for a long, long time. The rain outside continued its gentle song, washing the world clean, just as he had washed the muffled gray from mine.